All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's live cooking demonstration. My name is Ryan Smith. I'm the Wellness Program Administrator here at Georgia State University's Employee Development and Wellness Services. By trade, I am a registered dietitian, and I'm very excited to be cooking with you today. Before we get started, I did want to cover just a couple quick things. We're going to be recording today's session, so if you'd like to view it again later or share it with a colleague, we'll have that available on our YouTube channel, and we'll also be sending out a link to it via email and a follow-up email that you'll get from us after today's event. If at any point during the presentation you have any questions or comments regarding the recipe, or if you're having any audio-visual issues, please go ahead and post those in the chat. You'll find that on the right side of your WebEx screen. We will be monitoring that, and we'll be sure to address any questions regarding the recipe at the end of today's presentation. We will ask that as you issue your comments, please try to make sure that you are sending them to all panelists. That will allow both myself and Tony to be able to view them and address them as needed so that we can continue with the demonstration. And then at the end of the presentation, like I mentioned, I'll talk over any food-related comments or questions that may arise. So a few things about today's recipe. We're going to be making spicy tofu burrito bowls. In terms of equipment, you're not going to need too much. We're going to make use of the oven, and then other than that, you'll really just need a cutting board. This recipe is, as the name suggests, a little spicy. So I'll talk you through a couple opportunities you'll have to reduce the amount of heat in it if you'd like to. I'm someone who enjoys spicy food, and this one definitely gets up there once all the spices are in at the end and you're tasting it. There's some serious heat there that you're feeling, which, again, if you're into it, is absolutely wonderful. If you're not, though, we're going to be using sriracha today in a couple places, and we can kind of dial that back if you don't want it to be quite so hot. The first thing I have gone ahead and done is I've been pressing the tofu. Now, if you've never worked with tofu before, it does require you to press it beforehand. And essentially what you're doing is you'll go to the grocery store and you'll get your tofu block, which looks a little like this. And what you'll want to do is get some paper towels or dish towels if you prefer. And I've set it between two cutting boards and just put some weight on top of it with these bean cans. And essentially by doing that, we're allowing the tofu, the moisture in it, to seep out. And the tofu kind of works like a sponge. So when we take that moisture out, it'll be able to soak up a lot of flavor later. So I'm going to move these bean cans over to the side here and show you what we are working with. So you can see I removed the cutting board. This is a layer of paper towels that was absorbing some of the moisture. And then we've got our slabs of tofu here. And whenever you're pressing tofu, you'll want to do it for at least 15 minutes. The longer you press it, usually the more flavor it's able to pick up later. So if you can prepare a little bit ahead of time, you do get rewarded for it, which is nice. So I'm going to start by just cutting this into 1-inch cubes here. Nothing too fancy about it. Now, tofu is a really interesting food. If you've never had it before, it may look a little strange. You might be on the fence about it, but you can basically make it taste like whatever you want it to taste like, depending on the seasonings and sauces that you add. And tofu is a really affordable and healthy source of protein, which is nice. When it comes to protein foods, if we're doing animal proteins, there are certainly some healthy animal proteins out there. We could do grilled chicken, we can do lean ground beef, fish, things like that, but they tend to be fairly costly. So if you're on a budget, tofu can be very convenient for getting in your quality protein without breaking the bank. So that's one nice benefit to use it. So we've chopped them up into 1-inch cubes, and what I'm going to do is just transfer them to a medium-sized mixing bowl here. And right now, if you were to eat the tofu, if you're unfamiliar with it, it wouldn't taste like much of anything. It has a spongy texture to it, but without sauces or seasonings, it's pretty unremarkable. So that's where all of our flavorings are going to come in, that we'll talk about here in just a moment. Now, a couple things that I have been doing to prepare for this is we are going to top our bowl, or we're going to make the base of our bowl rice. So I've actually, behind the scenes here, gone ahead and prepared some rice. So if you're cooking this at home, this would be a good opportunity to get your rice cooking. When we send out the recipe later on today, after today's presentation, it'll have the breakdown of when to start the rice, so on and so forth. But we're trimming it down a little bit for the sake of the presentation today. So we've got our tofu in the mixing bowl here. And what we're going to do is we're going to start by coating it with a little bit of olive oil, and a little bit of sriracha. So this is our first opportunity, if you're not a fan of heat, to dial back the amount we're going to do. For the olive oil, we're going to do 1 tablespoon. Now, olive oil is nice because it is a heart-healthy oil. It is lower in saturated fats and higher in the healthy unsaturated fats, which makes it a great thing for us to use in today's demonstration. Sriracha, if you're not familiar, is just a hot sauce. You can really use any hot sauce you'd like. I'm going to be using 2 tablespoons of it here, which is admittedly a decent bit of sriracha. Again, if you are not a fan of heat, I would significantly reduce the amount that you're about to do. You do want to have some sort of sauce here, though, to give it some flavor, because like I mentioned, without it, the tofu really doesn't get to shine very well. So we've added that in. All I'm going to do here is just mix this around a little bit so that each piece of tofu has some of the olive oil on it and some of the sriracha coating it as well. You'll see the tofu will start to turn that orange color, which is exactly what we'd want and expect. That is the tofu doing what it does. It's soaking up the flavor. It's going to absorb all of that. And then we're going to add additional seasoning here in a moment to give it just a more complex flavor profile that we can enjoy. So I've mixed that around a little bit, making sure that each piece of tofu has a little bit of oil and sriracha on it. And we're going to set this to the side for just a moment. What we're going to do next is we are going to make our seasoning blend. So I'm starting with 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. This is going to act as a little bit of a thickener kind of, and it's going to give us a nice, almost bready coating to it. We're not going super heavy on it, but it'll make the texture really nice at the end of this after we bake the tofu. Next, I'm going to combine a few different seasonings. This is 1.5 teaspoons of garlic powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of hot chili powder. Now, again, if you don't like spice, you can omit this seasoning or just reduce it a little bit. A teaspoon of paprika, 1 tablespoon of brown sugar. So we're doing a little bit of sweet with our spicy here. And then 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Okay. And once you've got all that in there together, you can just mix it around. And this is going to turn sort of a light pinkish color because of the paprika being so strong. It'll stain it a little bit. And eventually, once you've got that all incorporated, the main thing you want to do is make sure that that brown sugar breaks apart. It has a tendency to clump together a little bit, and we don't want it to just be in one piece. We want a little bit of sweetness everywhere. So once you've mixed that around a little bit, you will go back to your bowl of tofu with the sriracha and the olive oil, and we are just going to dump that on there. And now, because the tofu is sticky from the oil, we are going to shuffle it around a little bit, and each piece of tofu is going to be able to pick up some of this seasoning mixture, get some of that cornstarch on there, and this will add a lot more complexity to the flavor. We're bringing in that salt, we're bringing in the garlic, the paprika. It's all going to mix together very, very nicely. And my kind of marker for when I know I'm done here is just making sure that there's no dry seasoning left. So that powder, of course, is very dry, but as you mix it with our wet ingredients, the sriracha and the olive oil, you'll see how it all comes together. Okay, so that's good for now. We're going to set that over to the side just a little bit longer. And what we're going to do is on the same baking sheet that we put the tofu on, we're going to have some bell peppers because we want to bring some vegetables into the mix to make this healthy. Now, as I'm cutting the bell peppers, I'll briefly talk about my method. Essentially, what I like to do is cut the top and the bottom off, and then I'll show you what I do after that. So I've gone ahead and rinsed these. I cut the tops, I turn it, and I cut the bottom. And what this does is it gives us a pretty easy access to this middle part that we want to cut out. There's usually just a handful of connecting points, and you can take your knife and sever those like so. And that makes it pretty simple to just pull those pieces out. Now at this point, I'm going to just cut this into these little flat pieces, which you can see makes it a lot easier to cut. The bell pepper is a pretty irregular shape, so cutting it into strips can be tricky, but I find that this method is generally pretty helpful. Now, bell peppers are very, very healthy for us. They're loaded with vitamins and minerals. They have a good source of fiber in them as well. And whenever you are trying to meet your daily water needs, fruits and vegetables can actually help you do that. We, of course, want to drink water throughout the day, but any fruit or vegetable with water content in it, when we eat that, that helps us meet our hydration needs, which I think is a fun fact to think about. I know a lot of us are probably carrying around some big water bottles to try to meet our goals, but eating fruits and vegetables can help you get there as well. So keep that in mind. So we'll go ahead and repeat that process for the second bell pepper here, where I will once again cut off the top of it and then cut off the bottom, which gives me easy access to that middle part that I will now go ahead and chop out. Now our oven, we've got it preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature we're going to be working with today. That's a good temperature for just allowing us to roast all this stuff evenly. We want them to get, a little crispy in there, gives us some nice texture. And something I didn't mention yet is that this is a recipe that will make 4 servings. So it is phenomenal for meal prepping throughout the week, or if you've got a household that wants to eat some food, you can definitely get some good mileage out of this and have something for the whole family or just your friends to enjoy. Let's just finish cutting this last bell pepper piece here. Okay. And in terms of the size of the bell pepper pieces, we're just trying to make them match roughly. So as long as all the pieces are about the same size, that means that they'll have equal opportunity to cook whenever we're working with them. So the next thing I'm going to do is grab the baking sheet here that I've got. And I've lined it with foil just for the sake of easier cleanup. You do not have to do this, but I like to do it because it just, at the end of it, then I know I can just pull the foil out and not worry about things. We're going to spread the tofu and seasoning mixture in an even layer on our baking sheet. Getting any extra sauce that might have been left behind. And we want to try to make it into that single layer because that will allow us to just fully cook the tofu. If it's stacked on top of each other, those pieces are not going to cook as quickly. So if you can spread it out evenly, that'll be good for making sure that they get well done. You can eat tofu like this without it being, baked or stir-fried or anything like that. But people find it a little mushy usually, so applying some heat is usually a good idea. And now what I'm going to do is same idea. I'm just going to move the bell peppers to the other side of the baking sheet here. Okay. And trying to spread those out evenly so they can all cook together. Now, we've already added oil to the tofu, so it's good to go. It's not going to stick to the foil or anything like that, but the bell peppers don't have anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a very small amount of olive oil, just like a gentle drizzle. You can measure it and do about a teaspoon if you'd like, a teaspoon or two. And that's just going to, again, one, give it some nice taste because it'll have a little extra fat in it, and it's going to prevent it from sticking. If you'd like, you can also do just a pinch of salt and pepper. Just a small amount. We're trying not to go too overboard on sodium. So at this point, the recipe gets a little bit easier. We've done all the hard work, which is great. You're going to put this in the oven on the middle rack, again, preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're going to bake it for 30 to 40 minutes. Now, the best indication is to kind of take a look at it and see, you'll want the peppers to start to get a little bit of that roasted kind of charred texture on them, that nice coloring. That'll be a good indicator. The tofu will also start to turn a darker brown color. If at 30 minutes it's not quite there, you can go ahead and leave it in for another 5 and check at 35. And then at about 40 minutes, it should be done. So that 30 to 40 minute range is the sweet spot. So I'm going to go ahead and set this out of the way. For the sake of time today, I have pre-prepared this and pre-baked it. So I'll be pulling that one out here in just a moment. I'm actually just going to set this on the counter. And we're going to prepare a couple other things, because if you are making this in real time at home, this would be a good opportunity to make our dressing. So we've added some seasoning to the tofu, which is great. But when we're assembling our burrito bowl at the end, we want to have a little more flavor than that. So we're going to make a tahini dressing today. It's very, very good. I'm a big fan of it. It's great on salads, on burrito bowls. You could put it in sandwiches or pita pockets. Very versatile. So the main ingredient, as the name might suggest, of a tahini dressing is going to be tahini. Now, if you're not familiar with tahini, essentially what this is if you think of peanuts and peanut butter, this is going to be like peanut butter made out of sesame seeds. So it's made from ground up sesame seeds. It's very creamy and thick like peanut butter is. So it adds some protein and it adds some healthy fats to what we're doing too, which tends to make the meal feel more savory and helps us feel fuller a little bit longer, which is a nice benefit. You can find this in the grocery store. It's usually I've found it in like the baking aisle before, but depending on where you shop, it may be in other places. You can always ask someone who works there if you're having some trouble with it. So we're going to measure out half a cup of this. And something I want to note is if you've got tahini, maybe you're keeping it in the fridge and it's left over. If you haven't used it in a while, you definitely want to give it a stir. It's kind of like natural peanut butter where the oil can separate and you want to mix it around a little bit so that it's all evenly incorporated. And bear with me here, I am scooping out the very last remains of this container of tahini I've had. We've actually used it for a couple different recipes in cooking demonstrations, making some really interesting dishes. So I'm trying to finally finish out this container. Okay. So just to give you an idea of what it looks like, because I mentioned it was kind of like peanut butter, you can see it's like kind of creamy peanut butter or natural peanut butter, which tends to be a little more runny. It's very nutty and kind of almost like oaky in its smell. It's an interesting food for sure. It's not something that I've ever really eaten by itself, though you certainly could. I've mainly used it in dressings and different dishes while cooking. So we'll get our half a cup of tahini in there, again, adding some healthy fats and protein. And I'll set that over to the side. And we're going to add a couple more things to this dressing. We're going to do 2 tablespoons of lime juice. If you have a fresh lime, that will work great as well. But we're going to do 2 tablespoons, which is 1 fresh lime equivalent, essentially. And that's going to give us a little bit of an acid and some nice tanginess to it, which will make the flavor more complex. Now, the dressing calls for 1 tablespoon of sriracha again. So this is, once again, an opportunity where if you want to reduce the heat, you can do a smaller amount. I am here for it, though. I do like spicy food, so I'm going to go ahead and add in the sriracha. Okay. All right, and then a couple more things. We're going to add a 1/4 cup of water. So I mentioned the tahini is pretty thick. We want it to be able to run a little bit to be like a dressing, so I'm adding a 1/4 cup of water. If you find at the end that the dressing's still too thick, you can add additional water, just a tablespoon at a time, until it gets to the consistency that you're happy with. And the last thing we're going to do is just add a very, very small pinch of salt. We really, really don't need to do a lot for this. I'm actually going to use 1/8 of a teaspoon because we've added salt in a couple other places in the recipe, and I don't want to overdo it. So we've added that there. Okay. And at this point, what you can do is just mix this together. If you've got a whisk, this is a great application for it. It's really good for mixing dressings. As you may have noticed, if you've been on our demonstrations before, I'm in a new kitchen now, so I've moved recently, and we are mostly unpacked, but there are a couple items that are missing in action, one of them being our whisk. So if you don't have a whisk at home, you can see a spoon works just fine. It may take a little more stirring to get it to that consistency you need to get it to, but it will incorporate and you will be able to smooth it out. And I'll try to show you a little more closely what that looks like. So you can see we've just made a salad dressing, basically. And it's very flavorful. It's got a lot of fun mixes between the spiciness, that kind of tartness from the lime juice. We're getting some savory creaminess from the tahini. It comes together very nicely. All right, so I've made a pretty good mess here right now, but we're going to assemble our tofu burrito bowls. So give me just a moment. So this is the pre-baked tofu and bell peppers that I made earlier. And hopefully, I mean, I can see in the camera right here what I'm looking at. Those colors really pop. We can see the tofu gets that nice. I mean, they almost look like little chicken nuggets from where I am. They get a really nice kind of crispy texture to them. They're very flavorful, very spicy. They've got that kick. The bell peppers, of course, I really like. Just roasted vegetables like that. There's a lot of nice flavor that comes out when you do that. So when you're assembling your bowl, I mentioned I pre-made some rice. You could omit the rice if you wanted to, for whatever reason, if you're trying to keep it lower in carbohydrate, or you could substitute it for another grain like quinoa or couscous could go great at the bottom of this. But to keep it as kind of a traditional burrito bowl, we are just using some rice there that I've got as our base. Now, brown rice is generally a healthier choice. I'm actually just using white rice today. And the main reason for that is white rice does cook a little bit faster. And one of the benefits of brown rice is we get a little more fiber. But we have made some excellent nutritional choices by adding this bell pepper in here. So we're already getting a good source of fiber. We've got a lot of nutrients coming from the meal. So everything's still in a balance. whenever you're making a healthy recipe, things don't have to be perfect. Not every food has to be at its like peak nutritional level. If we're making generally healthy choices, we can combine foods in a lot of great ways and still feel very good about it. So we've got our white rice base. And then what you can do is you can scoop some of the tofu out. Again, it makes about 4 servings. So if you want to take roughly a quarter of the tofu and top it, and then I'm going to get some of these bell pepper pieces here, which look excellent, and top that. And then let me shift this out of the way. Let's talk about nutritionally what we have here and then what we're missing that we can add to make it a little better. Our rice at the bottom is carbohydrates. So those are going to give us some kind of quick energy. Our body loves carbohydrates. So we've got that covered. That's our grain. We have our good source of protein coming from the tofu. So the tofu is giving us the protein to help with our muscles, with our tissue repair and growth, a lot of good functions in the body that rely on protein. Our vegetables are here in the form of the bell peppers. They're adding vitamins and minerals, fiber, a little bit of water. So there's a lot of good here. One thing that we don't really have in the recipe at the moment in the bowl is a source of healthy fats. And we're going to address that in 2 different ways. One is our dressing that we made, which will add some creaminess to it. And usually meals with a healthy source of fat in them, I mentioned earlier, help us feel just more satisfied and more full. If you've ever eaten a meal and been hungry an hour later, it might be that maybe you were missing some protein or some healthy fats in there. So combining nutrients like that can really help us be satisfied. But the other way we're going to add healthy fats is with an avocado. So since we are making a burrito bowl, an avocado is an excellent thing to add in there. Of course, its flavors work really well with this style of cuisine. So we're going to cut one of these avocados up and use about a quarter of it to just add some little pieces to this, enhancing the dish overall and adding a lot more nutrition. So for the avocado, when you're selecting them, you'll want to make sure that it is ripe. Whenever you pick it up at the grocery store, you want it to yield a little bit to your pressure. So you should feel it go in a little bit, but if it's like mushy when you touch it, that's probably no good. It might be overripe or it might be damaged, but you should feel a little bit of give. If it's hard as a rock, it's going to take a couple days for it to get ripe still. This one feels pretty good, so we'll see when we cut into it. If you find the little hole at the top there where it used to be connected at the stem, you'll cut along that, and you'll see what I do. When I cut into it, I'm going to cut, and it's going to meet with a middle part here, which is just the middle of the avocado. You'll see what's in the center. There's a big just a big pit basically, and you won't be able to cut through that. So don't try to push your knife all the way through the avocado. You're going to hit something that's going to feel like a rock, and that's normal. At this point, we're going to slowly turn the avocado, rotating the knife through it like so, until we've come all the way around. And once you've come all the way around, you should be, if your avocado's ripe, here we go, hopefully, yes, you should be able to pull that apart pretty easily, and you'll get this kind of cartoonish image of what the avocado looks like. If you see pictures, you always see it looking like that. And you can pull that guy out and discard the middle part there. What we want is that yellowy green part. And what I'm going to do for this, since we're only going to use about a quarter of it, since this makes 4 servings, we'll use part of the avocado for each one. I'm actually going to cut this in half. And at this point, some people prefer to cut it while it's still in the skin because it gives it some kind of structural integrity, which I do like doing as well. You are not going to eat the skin, though. We're just going to eat that inside part. So we're going to make cuts not through the skin, but to the skin. And you can kind of see how it'll fan out like that while still staying connected. At this point, you can use the knife to pry it out. I frequently will use a spoon to pull it out, or if you want, you can actually kind of just flip it out like that and pull the pieces out by hand. Really, whatever works for you. If you don't mind your hands getting a little messy, this tends to be simple, so I just like to do that. Okay, I'll wipe my hands off here because I got some good avocado all over it now. So now we can see we got a little green in here visually, which is nice. So we've added some very healthy fats to it. And the other pieces of avocado I'll use for the other servings. And then the last thing that we're going to do is we've got our tahini dressing. I'm going to mix it around a little bit. And like I said, if you want to make it thinner, you can add more water to it. But I'm good with this very creamy consistency here. And I'm just going to drizzle some of that over it to give it some nice additional flavor. And then at the end, I will try to give you a close-up of that. We have our spicy tofu burrito bowl. Now, I made a serving of this earlier, and I'm really, really happy with this recipe. I found it very filling and satisfying, largely because we have these healthy fats in the form of the avocado and the tahini dressing. The protein helped me feel like I got just a good hearty meal, and I knew that I was doing good for my body by getting the vegetables in the form of the bell peppers, getting that fiber, vitamins, and minerals. So a really, really nice mix of food. These also reheat incredibly well. You can make the 4 servings that the recipe does, put them in some airtight containers, and then just pop them in the microwave when you're ready to have another serving of it. So I always like meal prep recipes like that that do well whenever you're reheating them. Though you could enjoy it cold after cooking it if you wanted to. There are a lot of modifications we could make here. You might add some black beans to it. You might add some salsa, some tomatoes, other vegetables. Since it's a burrito bowl, you can pretty much style it however you want. But the core idea here is we're combining a healthy protein, which is our tofu in this case, with a carbohydrate, which is our rice, some vegetables, the bell pepper, and then some healthy fats, the avocado and the tahini dressing. So feel free to mix and match those ingredients and come up with your own spin on it. We are going to be sending out a copy of the recipe along with the nutrition information so that you can try this recipe at home yourself. I love to hear what people think of these, especially if you want to put your own creative spin on it. I'm always excited when people email me like, hey, Ryan, I tried your recipe and I swapped out this for this and it was so good. So if you've got ideas or you try something like that, please share it. I'm going to check the chat here because I do see we got a couple messages. Okay, so let me scroll back up here. All right, so the tofu purchased from the store, this is a question about the tofu. When you purchase it from the store, is it raw? So yeah, when you purchase the tofu from the store, I'll try to show you, the container's a little beat up now. It'll come in a carton like this generally. At Kroger, Publix, Walmart, it'll be refrigerated, or it'll always be refrigerated, and you'll often find it in the like health foods section. If you have a small refrigerated section for that, you'll find it there. And it comes in the form of a block and a liquid. So this is just, raw tofu. At the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that I had pressed it in advance to get some of that liquid out. And then we were able to chop it up and work with it, add the flavoring, and ultimately bake it. So it's raw when you purchase it at the store in its original form. And then we cooked it today to get it to that nice crispier texture. Okay, I see a comment. Looking forward to trying this. It looks good. I agree. I'm glad that it looks appetizing to you. Like I said, I really recommend this recipe. I think it's excellent. Another comment just saying that it looks delicious and someone's definitely going to try it, which I love to hear. So yeah, like I said, if you make it, I've had some people in the past who attend these and they'll send me photos of it to show me what they made. I love seeing that kind of stuff. It makes me really happy. So feel free to share your comments with me if you'd like to. I don't see any other questions or comments at this point in time. So I'll just do a few quick kind of closing announcements here. Like I said, we'll send out the recipe and the nutrition information along with a link to the recording if you want to watch it again or share it with a colleague who might have missed today's session. You'll also get a link to a short survey where you can take just a couple minutes to fill it out and let us know what you thought of today's session. What did you like? What do you think there's room for improvement in? And do you have any ideas or requests for future things? We love getting that feedback. It really helps us deliver better programs. And then lastly, if you are not aware of our offerings, we do have a ton of different wellness events that we do. We do these cooking demonstrations twice a month, but we also have a number of things not just related to nutrition. Tony Pilote is our exercise physiologist and our health and wellness coordinator, and she leads us on group walks around the campuses. She'll do virtual stretch breaks where you can just take a break during the day and loosen up at your desk. She'll do mini workouts on Friday just to help you get in some physical activity before you go into your weekend. We do meditation, we do yoga, we have our Snack and Share support groups, which gives people an opportunity to just vent and share what's on their mind and what they're going through. If you are not already on our mailing list, you can email us at edws@gsu.edu. We'll get you added, and every Monday we send out an email letting people know all the different events we'll be doing that week. Tomorrow, Friday at 12 p.m., we'll actually be doing a guided meditation session. So if you're interested, we'd love to have you attend that. You can check that out and get a nice little relaxation session in before you go into your weekend. So I did see one more question pop up. Where do we send the comments or photos? Yeah, so if you have a comment or a photo, you can send it to the EDWS email I mentioned, or actually, I'll put my email in the chat here real quick. So this is my work email there. Feel free to send it to me directly. That's another great way to get in contact with me if you want to talk shop a little bit about some of the nutrition recipes. So thank you again, everyone, so much for attending today. I love getting to do these demonstrations, and I'm happy to be making them for everyone. So keep an eye out in your inbox, either later today or tomorrow. You'll get that follow-up email. And with that being said, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.